He takes the heat. He does exactly what we elected him to do, which is fight. And many in Congress have lost their fight. And I appreciate what Congressman Bridenstine does in taking the stands that he does, and for taking the heat that he does. We don't always agree, but we do most of the time. So without further ado, if you would please join me in welcoming the most wonderful Congressman.
Well, I can say do I need to use this microphone? No.
Do you want him to? No? Okay.
I appreciate the intro, Rhonda, and I appreciate your leadership. Obviously, this is a great group. It's highly unlikely that I would be in the position I'm in if it wasn't for this group. And I think most people here know that. And there are other groups like you, in Northeast Oklahoma that have helped me extensively. And interestingly, I think I see most of your faces at these other groups.
We have to watch you.
Yeah, I was at the Tulsa Area Republican Assembly just a few nights ago, and probably half the people here were there. So that's a good thing. But Wade, I appreciate you being here. It's fantastic to have you in the 1st District of Oklahoma. We are, of course, leading the charge for conservatism, as are you. I can say, you mentioned, people say they're pro-life, therefore they're Republican. They say they're pro-Second Amendment, therefore they're Republican. And certainly those are issues that everybody in this room adheres to, but it goes beyond that. And as you mentioned, subsidies. There are organizations in this state, as a matter of fact, that have to make a decision. They are either pro-business or they are pro-free market. And I think what confuses a lot of Republicans is they believe pro-business is pro-free market, and that is absolutely not the case anymore. There is a collusion these days between government and business that picks winners and losers in the marketplace that is completely inappropriate. And interestingly, you guys know what probably organizations I'm talking about. Rhonda has been leading the charge against them for many years now, and these are the organizations that are likely going to attempt to have me beaten in a Republican primary. So we can't rest, we can't relent. I'm up for re-election in 10 months. Isn't that amazing? It seems like I just got there, but this is why it is the People's House. The House of Representatives is up for re-election every 2 years. That means you've got to do a primary, if necessary a runoff, and then a general election. And that's what keeps us accountable. And it's groups like this that hold our feet to the fire to make us accountable. So I'm honored to be here. I don't have a specific agenda, but if you guys have thoughts or concerns or questions, I'm happy to answer. Yes, sir.
Yes, this is a key issue when it comes to defunding Obamacare.
Yes.
Does not the House of Representatives have sole power in terms of funding the government? In other words, if you guys pass an appropriations bill involving government funding, that does not have to go through the Senate and be approved by the President. Is that correct? Or am I off there?
Well, when you think about discretionary spending, so there's two sides of the budget. You've got discretionary, which is about a third. Half of that is Department of Defense, and then all the other programs and agencies. Then you've got mandatory spending. On the mandatory side, you've got Medicare, you've got Social Security, you've got the big entitlement programs. When they wrote Obamacare, interestingly, they wrote Obamacare such that most of the funding for Obamacare is on the mandatory side, which means on an annual basis, when you try to fund the government on the discretionary has to be approved every year. It has to be appropriated every year. Mandatory is just on autopilot. And unless we pass a law to undo it, it just keeps going. Which, when we don't have the presidency, we're not going to be able to pass the laws to undo it. But here's the thing that I think is important for everybody to know. What we can do is we can take these must-pass pieces of legislation. A lot of people think they are must-pass. talking about things like the continuing resolution, and I'm talking about things like the debt ceiling increase.
That's exactly the kind of thing that I'm speaking of.
Yeah, so we can take these items and we can say in the continuing resolution we want to defund Obamacare. And but the challenge here is there are Republicans who don't want to do that because they are scared.
Well, see, in particular, Tom Coburn keeps saying this is undoable because you'll never get the Senate to go along, you'll never get the President to go along.
Right.
And so, but my understanding is you don't need to, because the House, the last time I read the Constitution, I got the impression the House has sole funding. They don't need those guys to
Right.
do what we can do funding.
So on the discretionary side, if we want to fund the government, we have to pass a continuing resolution because we haven't passed a budget. We haven't passed, and I say we, the House has passed a budget, but there's no agreement between the House and the Senate passed a budget. It was a Harry Reid budget with $1 trillion in new borrowing and $1 trillion in new taxes. It wasn't a serious effort at what should be a budget. So there's no agreement between the House and the Senate. Of course, the President's budget is just as bad as the Senate budget, the one he recommended or the one he proposed. But so here's what we do. You will hear people say you can't defund Obamacare in the continuing resolution because the continuing resolution is on the discretionary side and Obamacare is on the mandatory side mostly. Plus Obamacare uses subsidies in the tax code. It uses the IRS. These are not things that are on the discretionary side of the budget. So what they say is it can't be done. But here's what I think everybody in this room needs to understand. That is a straw man argument. Every year when we do the discretionary budget, we defund abortions paid for by the government, and we do it in the Hyde Amendment. And the Hyde Amendment is both mandatory and discretionary. So anybody who tells you it can't be done is incorrect. And I can say this too, when you think about the continuing resolution, in the House of Representatives, if we wanted to, we could tie the entire repeal of Obamacare to the continuing resolution. This is a bill just like any bill. Thank you.
So why can't you convince your colleagues to do the right thing?
Well, we are. We're working on it. Here's the thing. If we're going to pass a continuing resolution, the Democrats aren't going to help us do it because our vision is different than their vision. So really what we need is we need Republicans to stand up and say, look, we're also not going to pass a continuing resolution unless we get the defunding of Obamacare. You can call it the defunding, you can call it the dismantling, you can call it the repeal. Whatever language needs to be attached to the continuing resolution to destroy Obamacare is what we should be putting in the continuing resolution. And so if we have enough of us Republicans that say, look, we're not going to do this, then we put more pressure on leadership to actually go that direction. And certainly we've got great leaders in the Senate that are courageously stepping out and leading this charge, as Wade talked about. And I guess you guys took a trip down to Arkansas recently and listened to Jim DeMint and others. So it can be done. Anybody who tells you it can't be done is incorrect. The question is how much resolve do we have among Republicans in the House of Representatives? And the other question is this. If it goes back to the Farm Bill. There were 65 of us in the House of Representatives. We said we're not going to vote for a farm bill as long as it includes the 80% of it that is food stamps. And of course, then what does the leadership do? They go make a deal with the Democrats. And the Democrats promised them 40 to 60 votes. Well, then we had a member from the conservative side come out and say, okay, we want an amendment to the farm bill that says if you're going to receive food stamps, you either have to work or prove that you're trying to find work. And then that amendment passed. It passed on pretty much a party line vote where Republicans were standing up saying, look, you've got to either work or prove that you're working to get food stamps. And then the Democrats pulled their support. Well, what does leadership do then? They come back to people like me and they're like, we got to pass a bill, what are we going to do? Well, we're not going to vote for this. There are 65 of us. We are solid. We're not going to vote for this farm bill. And it died on the floor of the House because they didn't trust, they trusted Nancy Pelosi over us to begin with, which was a bad move. And so now the question is, on the CR, are they going to try to do the same thing, knowing that the Democrats will pull the rug out from under them again, or are they going to come to the conservatives who want to dismantle Obamacare in the CR and say, we're going to be with those guys this time because they know they're not going to leave us? Yes, sir.
you've got, I believe now 80 on this issue, right? So that was one question. And question two is, so you, are the 16,000 IRS agents on the discretionary side? Is that something that you guys can do?
Yeah, so the question was, are the IRS agents on the discretionary side? And the answer to that is yes. And this is the other, they make all these straw man arguments. Well, we can't defund it because we've already paid for it and all this other stuff. The reality is this. There are Health and Human Services agents right now that are writing the rules and regulations. People talk about how the bill is 2,800 pages long or tall. It's like a stack this big. But if you look at the stack of regulations, it goes through the roof. So the answer is yes. We need to defund the people that are continuing to put out new rules and regulations every day. We as members of Congress don't have any say in that. We have exchanged in this country, and I'm preaching to the choir, I know that, but we have exchanged.
We need to know that you know.
Sure. We have exchanged in this country what the Founding Fathers envisioned, which was a rule of law, where members of Congress pass law, and then that law is implemented, for the rule of man. Where I say we, they, historically, they've been passing laws where they say the executive branch will create the rules and enforce the rules. The executive branch will create the regulation and enforce the regulation. So now new things are coming out all the time. And the 16,500 IRS agents, now they say they're 2,000 IRS agents. Nobody really knows because there are IRS agents working on a whole bunch of different stuff every day. It could be, 20,000 IRS agents. Nobody knows how many IRS agents are involved in this process. And so this whole thing is a mess. And of course, I'm preaching to the choir on Obamacare, but if you guys want more details on it.
The IRS is mostly working on the enemies list, are they not?
Yeah, they're working on us.
Yeah, they may not have time for Obama.
Yeah, that's right. And then that's the other thing when you think about the IRS. And I think this is an important point to make. We now know that the organizations like this one that were targeted by the IRS when it came to their not-for-profit status, it wasn't just rogue actors. And first they said, oh, it's rogue actors in Cincinnati, or that it was the insensitive agents in Cincinnati, or it was bad mistakes, but it wasn't it wasn't policy and these kind of things. Well, now we find out that all those applications were actually going to an office in Washington, D.C. And now we're finding out that those agents in Washington, D.C., it went up to the highest levels within the IRS to one. There's two individuals in the IRS that are appointees of Barack Obama. There's two in the IRS that are appointees of Barack Obama. And these nonprofit packages, they were elevated by direction all the way up to one of the two appointees of Barack Obama in the IRS. So we're at the tip of the iceberg here. This is going to get a lot worse. So anybody who says, that these are, what did he say? They're not real phony scandals. Yeah. Anybody who says they're phony scandals is incorrect. Well, a couple other things I want to make real clear here before we go down to more questions. It wasn't too long ago. I was in my office watching the president. He's always giving a new speech on TV, and he says that the economy has grown faster and advanced farther than most other developed countries in the world. Do you guys remember this? It was part of his economy speech or whatever. But here's the reality. Grown faster, advanced further than most other developed countries in the world since the financial crisis. That was what he was talking about. So I went and I looked it up. And I went to the website. It's the CIA does a website every year. They take all the countries in the world and they put in rank order their growth, their GDP growth. The United States of America was number 128. Wow. We were behind. We were behind Russia, which of course has had a much more catastrophic collapse than we've ever had, at least in modern days. We were behind China, which of course is growing in leaps and bounds. We were behind Cuba, if you can imagine that. We were behind Mexico, which by the way is on the brink of a failed state because there's 90,000 dead bodies because of our open border on the south side of the United States. The drug war is raging down there. Cartels are killing cartels, and they're killing judges and police officers and politicians because we have an open border, and the Senate bill, as everybody here knows, doesn't do anything to fix the broken border on the south side of the United States. So when you look at this, so Cuba, we were behind Cuba, we were behind Mexico, we were tied with Egypt. This is, and the president's saying our economy is growing faster and advancing further than most other developed nations in the world. So I looked at, who are we above? Well, we're above the Eurozone countries that are having a fiscal and monetary crisis, the likes of which they've never seen before. And this is what's astonishing to me. If you look at what the president is doing to our country with the $1 trillion deficits and $85 billion a month in quantitative easing to pay for those deficits, we are headed in the same direction that the Eurozone is headed in. So if he says we're ahead of them, why is he implementing policies to make us look more like them? That's exactly what he's
Have you
doing.
written anything on this?
Not yet.
You might, and then that way we can help get it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about a rant?
All right.
Don't you have another minute coming every week
Yeah,
or something?
we can make, I'm happy to do 1 minute.
Debunking the man.
Yeah. And this is the other thing, and you guys need to be aware of this and talk about it among your peers. And that is that when you hear the president, he's talking about how the unemployment rate has come down from 10% to 7.4%. I think everybody in this room is aware that's not true. I mean, depending on how you measure it, yes, that's not true. But here's the important number that we need to start looking at, and everybody here needs to start sharing with their friends. When the president, in the middle of 2009, at the lowest point in our economic situation, the percent of adults employed in the United States was 59%. That was in the middle of 2009. Here we are now, after the president says that our economy has grown faster and advanced farther than most other developed nations in the world. We were at 59% then. Now we're at 58.7%. So the percentage of adults employed in the United States has, you could say it's stayed the same because it's not statistically significantly different. But you can't say that we have grown as far as the job market goes. So here's what's interesting. How is it that we go from 10.0% of unemployment down to 7.4%? We have the lowest, right now, we have the lowest labor force participation rate since 1979. Businesses aren't hiring. The businesses that exist are shifting employees from full-time to part-time. I was at a business just the other day. They've got 57 employees. They're trying to get down to 49 employees because then they don't have to comply with Obamacare. Obamacare is the anchor around the neck of the United States economy right now. And in that same speech, when he talked about how fast the economy was growing, he said, they created 195,000 new jobs in June. You guys remember the June jobs, 195,000 new jobs? What he didn't tell you is that we lost over 200,000 full-time jobs and we picked up over 300,000 part-time jobs, which explains why, before the 4th of July holiday, he decided to push off the employer mandate for another year. And by the way, when you push off the employer mandate, his goal here is to make the most egregious and painful parts of the law delayed because he knows that employers are going to, the economy is going to shrink because of this. And in the meantime, addict 30 million people to subsidies. Ronald Reagan said that the closest thing to eternal life on earth is a new government program. Because once you create the constituency of dependency, it can never be undone. And that's where we are. And that is why the president wants to addict more people to the subsidies. Because then, and by the way, as a nation, we are getting ready to spend almost $700 million promoting Obamacare. Your dollars are being spent to promote 700. That's more. That's you look at presidential elections on a Republican or Democrat side. That's what you're looking at. $700 million. This is a crazy amount of money that's being funded by you, the taxpayer, to promote their failed policy. And here's what's the amazing thing. we have Democrats right now, Jimmy Hoffa, the leader of a huge union, and other unions, they're all out there right now saying that Obamacare is destroying the 40-hour work week that has been the backbone of the American economy for generations. If we want to win, and what's funny is if leadership is telling you we have to not oppose Obamacare because we want to get reelected, they are incorrect. If we want to get back the Reagan Democrats to start voting Republican again, we need to do what the Reagan Democrats are telling us we ought to do. Real quick, I want to go to some other folks. Wow. Way in the back.
I want to clarify something and ask a question. Although appropriations bills start in the House, they still have to be approved by the Senate and signed by the President. Is that not true?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's only one house does not control spending. Okay.
Well, hold on, because what his point is correct. The continuing resolution expires on October 31st or September 1st, whatever you want to say. The continuing resolution expires, so if there is going to be funding of the government beyond that, we either have to pass appropriations or we have to pass a continuing resolution. Now, we haven't passed appropriations. We've passed a few of them in the House, but not in the Senate. And so we're going to have to pass, and I don't think we have to pass anything, but some people say we have to pass a continuing resolution. If we don't pass that, then that is what they call a government shutdown. When you talk about a government shutdown, it's really not that big of a deal. We have a government shutdown every weekend, and we get through the weekend.
That's right.
I want to understand, even the continuing resolution has to be passed by the Senate and signed off on by the President.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, my question to you is, if we take this tactic and we put a defunding or an appeal or something on the continuing resolution, we know that the Senate's not going to pass it, and if by some miracle they did, and then the President vetoed it, the government is going to supposedly shut down. All right. Here's my question. You know what's going to happen. The liberal media is going to cry and whine and moan, and they're going to drag out, tragedy after tragedy because somebody didn't get something because of this shutdown. My question to you is, okay, once you got the government shut down, what's step two? What are the Republicans going to do for step two after they accomplish this? And Jim, I want something done, believe me. But the Republicans are the worst people on God's earth to get out the word, explain their position, and make it in a manner that ordinary people can understand. And I'm sorry, but Reince Priebus has done nothing but embarrass us, and he has no clue what the rest of what the real world, how it works, or what we think, or anything. And you think they'd come to Oklahoma and talk to us? They run like rabbits.
Sure.
Object to her question. Using the phrase government shutdown is so incorrect.
Yeah.
That needs to be corrected.
I agree.
I remember the 1995 shutdown very, very well, and every Republican these days seems to be talking about it as a suicide pact if the Republicans do it, but in 1995, Republicans didn't get hurt at all.
No, in fact, we
Picked up two Senate seats,
Yeah.
and they may not have lost a handful of seats in the House, but I mean,
Yeah, but if
certainly.
you talk about losing 8 seats in the House and picking up 2 seats in the Senate, that's a net push. It doesn't switch anything.
Basically, it's a wash. In
Right.
other words, the Republican Party really didn't get hurt from the 1995 shutdown.
Right.
And then all
They
the
got
entitlement checks
criticized,
and payroll and everything continues to flow.
I want to address what Peggy brought up earlier, which is, what is step 2? And this is a question that everybody talks about. Do you think the Democrats were worried about step 2 when they passed it in the dark of night with Nancy Pelosi saying you have to pass it to find out what's in it, was her words? When they passed it on a pure party line vote, twisting every Democratic arm to try to force them to get this thing done? The reality is they lost a seat in Massachusetts. Step 2 is this. We win the Senate and we win the House of Representatives in bigger numbers. That's step 2. The people gave us a Republican seat in Massachusetts because they believed we were going to do back then what we haven't done up until now. So if we want to win seats and we want to take back our country and move it in the constitutional direction that we all believe in, we've got to stand for what we really believe in. And you're right, Republicans are terrible at PR, which is why the message has to be this: when we go forth with this, and I think we're going to get it done, quite frankly. When we go forth with this, it's going to require leadership within the Republican ranks to go on TV and say this: we funded the government. We funded the government, but we didn't fund Obamacare. The question is, why is the president irresponsibly shutting down the government?
Do you think you're going to find that leadership?
I'll go on TV.
Run for speaker, Joe.
That's right.
Hold on, Peggy, continue.
One more sentence. The challenge to the Republicans in Congress is you have got to get your people in line. I mean, my God, the Democrats, they can pass the stinkiest bill and they muscle their members, and we don't have McCain out there bad-mouthing everything that we try to do.
Yeah.
Their people don't do that. They play the party line, they stick together like glue. Republicans have got to do that.
Right, you're correct, but here's the difference. In one party, you have a collectivist mentality. The president calls it collectivism. You have a very union-oriented mentality. On the other side, you have people that think for themselves.
That's fine, but the only people we hear of are the weak-kneed progressive lights.
Well, I understand your thought and concern on that, but I would say if you watch the media today, in fact, driving in, I heard a commercial, and it was Mike Lee from Utah talking about defunding Obamacare and the CR. We have great leaders. We've got Mike Lee in Utah. We've got Ted Cruz. I mean, I am so impressed with Ted Cruz. I mean, this is a guy that is absolutely, and he's relentlessly on TV and in the media. Certainly Rand Paul is doing the same thing. Marco Rubio, it seems we've got him back on our side now, and he's pushing hard for this as well. So these are all positive developments.
I want to add this. These, like Heritage Action and Freedom Works, are running these commercials, and it takes money to run these commercials. If you're serious, you better talk with your wallet, because they need the money to bump up. Oh, these commercials should be running almost every other commercial, bless you, Mom, just like they do in campaigns. If we wanted to fund it, listen, it's up to us. It's up to us that are going to go and talk to the different representatives and senators. So I would encourage you to go to Heritage Action or to Freedom Works and donate money to help them fund these commercials so that more people can hear it and get fired up about it.
Okay, we've got some very patient folks at Mammoth. You'll go first.
Do you think Mark Levin's proposal in his book have legs?
Well, I would say, number one, I don't know if it has legs or not, but I can definitely say I support it.
Okay.
And I'm going to be putting together a sense of the House of Representatives that although we can't get it done in Washington, D.C. because we've got a bunch of careerist politicians, that at this point, a constitutional convention is the way it's going to have to be done.
Can we get Oklahoma to play ball with it?
I think, well, it's going to require you guys. Certainly, you got my support 100%.
Okay.
But the answer is, yeah, I think if any state would get behind this, Oklahoma would be the state that could do it. But the great thing about this is it leaves the politicians inside the Beltway. They have no control over this. And it gives the power back to the people, which of course is what Mark Levin wants to do to begin with.
Yes.
So I think it's a great. I've now received in my office the book from two different people, and I haven't delved into it deeply because it just came out. But I've read enough of it to know that these are great proposals.
Quick follow-up on that same point, that's the one thing at Senator Coburn's town hall that he was explicit about. He read the book, he endorses the book and thinks it's a good idea. I was kind of surprised.
Yeah, Tilly actually has to fight for it.
Probably. Well, we're gonna do a sense of the House piece of legislation, and it's not gonna be binding because it's a constitutional convention. It has nothing to do with the House. But essentially, and we're gonna find out what members of Congress are willing to co-sponsor the legislation, which will put people on record who's for it, who's against it.
Cool.
We keep hearing a lot about the reason that they don't want to fight this fight is because of the political fallout. But I don't get any sense that they've considered at all the far worse aspect here in that if they don't fight on defunding, if they don't fight on the debt ceiling, and then they work to pass amnesty, that seems to me like a far worse political issue that they're going to be facing down the road. And is there any sense of leadership this is on the radar of the thought of what could happen with the grassroots and really deflating the momentum going into the 2014 primary?
Well, it's not just, in the grassroots, I think everybody is concerned about the grassroots because it's the grassroots that send emails and make phone calls. The question is, they're dismissive of the grassroots and they have a bigger, they think they have a bigger population outside the grassroots. But what we're talking about here with the constituency of dependency is a fundamental shift in the electorate to people who are going to be voting to get their money from the federal government. And you could see a shift away from the Republican Party for generations. And that's going to be, and I say generations, I say that should we make it that long, given that we have trillion-dollar deficits and we're crushing the U.S. dollar to pay for them.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
Peggy asked about the step 2.
Yeah.
And I'm preaching to the choir here because you went back to where I was going to point out, and that is step 1. And
Right.
step 1 is the messaging that needs to be out there right along with defunding in the continuing resolution. So I couldn't agree more. The Republican Party is doing squat on
Yeah,
that message.
and on messaging, I want to anchor on messaging for 1 second. 1995, somebody already pointed out that we didn't get crushed in 1996 because of 1995. What I would say is that in 1995, we didn't have the internet. I mean, we had the internet, but it wasn't as prevalent as it is now.
Now you got podium.
Right. We didn't have Fox News Channel. We didn't have, we did, but not in the same, at the same level. We didn't have the talk radio circuit that we've got now. We didn't have the 9.12 Project or OK for Tea or Tea Party Patriots.
The Blaze.
The Blaze. We didn't have Heritage Action. We didn't have all of these mechanisms we have. And by the way, in spite of not having any of that, the people still said, look, it's not that big of a deal. And what we were fighting back then was Hillary Care. I mean, it's so. And here we have something even. We have Obamacare. We have an issue that Republicans and Democrats alike agree that is bad. So it's not going to hurt us. And if we don't,
Any item that goes hand in hand with the idea of defunding things in government, which 90% of it should be defense anyway. I don't know about the rest of the folks here, but recently, our telephones, our cell phones, we have a landline at home, are starting to become worthless to us because we are getting calls every single day, cell phones, home phone that's on the do not call list, of people trying to sell us crap associated with the Affordable Care Act.
is that right?
I have to wonder, and I doubt that you necessarily know this answer, or if it's worth the research time to find it, is there something in that bill that makes the do not call list not apply to people that are trying to peddle crap to go with that bill?
Sure.
And if so, when you're defunding things, defund the Federal Trade Commission and everything to do with the do not call list, because it is absolutely nothing but a worthless government bureaucracy that does nothing.
Sure.
It does not stop my phone from ringing, and it is worthless for me to put in complaints about it. I put them in until,
Nothing happens.
and nothing happens.
I will look into that. What I could say, and I've read the entire Obamacare bill, and I don't remember seeing anything in there about.
I
the do
did
not
too,
call.
but if you were able to interpret it, you did better than I.
Right, I agree with you. And I would also say that I have not read the, 18,000 pages of regulations that have come out. I've not read that.
My life expectancy won't cope with that.
Right. So, there could be.
It's gonna be shorter under the Affordable Care Act.
Right, that's right. So I guess what I would say is there could be a regulation in there that I'm not aware of, but I will absolutely look into it and I'll ask the right questions. Yes, sir.
Yeah, the biggest concern regarding that is that I heard that to implement the Affordable Care Act, the government has given Planned Parenthood $60 million to hire what you call navigators.
Yes.
And these navigators have access to IRS databases, so they're able to look at every citizen in the United States, look at their financial status. I think they may have access to other databases that have confidential information, and they're able to reach out to every single person to make sure if they're compliant or would they be eligible for the Affordable Act. My biggest concern is privacy. That was the article. What can we do, or is there anything that we can do to protect our privacy so we don't have these people, I don't know who they're hiring, I heard it was $30 an hour, they're hiring anybody with no background check to go into confidential databases and look up our personal information. Is there any protection for you citizens against that kind of privacy violation?
Yeah, well, I think everybody has seen the concerns with privacy under this administration, whether you're talking about the NSA or the IRS, and certainly the Affordable Care Act. You brought up Planned Parenthood.
Yeah. $60 million.
It's unbelievable to me what this administration gets away with.
Yeah.
When you think about Obamacare, everybody in this room under Obamacare, everybody in this room is going to be paying for other people's abortion-inducing drugs. Also under Obamacare, when you talk about the multi-state programs, the multi-state insurance plans for government employees, we're not just paying for abortion-inducing drugs, we're no kidding, as taxpayers paying for abortions. So this is, and then just the way that they do things, they're going to give a contract to Planned Parenthood just to stick it in the eye of everybody in America who's pro-life to say, look, you don't have, look, in America, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, we should never be forced to make a decision between following the laws of the country we love and following our religious beliefs. And when it comes to the First Amendment of the Constitution, it says Congress, that's us, the United States Congress, we shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And
Especially in the military.
Especially in the military.
Yeah, that's my issue. I just can't believe what's going on.
Yeah.
Especially in the Air Force.
Yeah, I mean, we're jumping a little bit around here, but what I would say is the First Amendment is critically important to the foundation of our nation. It ought to be upheld, and you shouldn't have to make a decision about following the laws of the country you love or following your religious beliefs, which is what Obamacare is forcing people to do in this country right now. As it relates to religious freedom in the Department of Defense, this is another big issue. I'm on the Armed Services Committee. We put into the National Defense Authorization Act, we put in there a religious freedom protection clause, and that clause basically said, had a whole lot of things in there, but chief among them is that you can't appoint atheist chaplains, which is what this administration has been attempting to do. Can you imagine?
It's an oxymoron.
What we are. So we passed it that you can't appoint atheist chaplains. And here's the deal. Everybody knows that atheists serve in the military, just like Christians serve in the military. The reality is, if you're an atheist, there are ways you can get help. There are counselors. There are psychologists. But what we don't want to do, and this is an agenda item of the left, which is to institutionalize godlessness. That's what this is. And so yeah, we stood up and we said, look, we're not going to allow the appointment of atheist chaplains. The idea here is not because atheists need chaplains. The idea is they want to destroy the chaplaincy. So yeah, we said this. Interestingly, as soon as that happens, they make a move to appoint, and we passed the bill, they make a move to appoint atheist chaplains. And so then we have to defund atheist chaplains in the Defense Appropriation Bill, which we did. But look, what they're going to do is they're going to try to force this into the courts and have the courts overturn the Congress. which is why I really like one of the amendments in the Liberty book, the Liberty amendments. There's an amendment that said that the Supreme Court rulings can be overturned with a 2/3 majority, which I think takes a little bit of power. That's right. Yes, sir, in the back.
Can you discuss the Benghazi investigations and how that's going on?
Yeah, and there are tremendous amounts of elements that I'm not privy to. We're working on other things. That's a different committee. But I can tell you that I support, you know, a special investigator to go out and find out what really happened. What astonishes me, and I've looked at, you know, I've looked at some of the military aspects of this. What astonishes me is that the next day, you have the Obama administration going out and selling this as something other than a terrorist attack. And they blame an obscure video that nobody had ever heard of before, nobody had ever seen really. And they start blaming that, not because it's correct, because they knew it wasn't correct. As far as I can tell, they did it because they didn't want anybody to know that they're losing, you know, ground with Al-Qaeda. And of course, it's before an election, and I think that's really what had most to do with this. So that's tremendously troubling. Even worse is then the president himself goes to the United Nations 6 days later, gives a speech, and blames the same obscure video, knowing full well that video had nothing to do with this. Al-Qaeda is still very real. They're still very dangerous, and they're on the move around the world. And to suggest that they are diminished, this is what's so astonishing. The president is out there saying that poor Al-Qaeda has been eliminated or diminished or they're ineffective. He's out there saying all this stuff, and then he shuts down all of the consulates and embassies in the Middle East because of a threat. And you can't have it both ways, which is what he's trying to do. Charles, if you'll...
Can I go after Mary Lynn over to
Mary Lynn? Okay. And I'm getting the hook from my own staff here. I'm going to a military retirement for a friend of mine who's been engaged in the war on drugs with me. He's retiring. He's at Tinker Air Force Base, so we got to get on the road to that retirement. But we'll do two more. Can I do two more? Because I want to get to Miss Tasha. Okay, yes, ma'am.
Yes, my comment and question is with the printing press going 24/7, which is 2009, and the value of the dollar is decreasing on the world market, how are we going to pay for all these things anyway when China will call our milk due because we got phony money floating around out there?
That's a wonderful question, and this audience has probably heard me talk about this a lot. We are now in a position, we've got trillion-dollar deficits. We are printing money to buy the bonds that fund the government because we have trillion-dollar deficits. Ms. Tasha, you can put your hand out. You'll be my last question, but let me get through this one. The great thing about this audience is that everybody is so engaged and so aware of what's going on that there's no shortage of conversation. So that's a good thing. You guys should all pat yourselves on the back. But that's why you guys are so important to holding politicians responsible, and I think that's a wonderful thing that you guys are doing. And thank you, Rhonda, for continuing to hold this together. So when you go forward and you talk about the trillion-dollar deficits, we've got to sell bonds to fund the government. We can't sell enough bonds in order to fund the government these days. So now we've got the printing press turned on. We're creating $85 billion a month, over $1 trillion a year, which interestingly matches almost perfectly our annual deficits. So we're printing the money to buy the bonds to fund the government. When we do this, people in this room who are seniors, who are on fixed incomes, their interest rates, you may have lived your entire life, saved appropriately, come to your retirement, and now you can't retire because you can only get 1 or 2% on your investments. And the reason for that is because we're printing money to buy the bonds. We drive the price of the bonds up artificially with newly created money. Those higher prices result in lower interest rates, which are then reflected throughout the market. So seniors on fixed income are squeezed. They can't get the return on investment to sustain their standard of living. And on the other end, you've got the U.S. dollar being weakened, and the prices in the market are going up. Food, gasoline, housing, which are the biggest portions of seniors' budgets.
Don't forget taxes.
And taxes, there you go.
Oh, yeah.
21 new taxes in Obamacare. I'll go down that road if you want. But then when you turn around and you talk about seniors being squeezed on the income side, they're also being squeezed on the price side. But who does it affect the worst? And I think this is a message that conservatives need to be carrying. This affects the poor the worst because they're the ones, and this is what I've found in Washington, D.C. Gotta get my ties straight. Here's what I found in Washington, D.C. If Republicans pick up the mantle of advocating for the poor because of these egregious trillion-dollar deficits and how it adversely affects the very people that the president says he wants to help, they don't know what to do. It confuses the Democrats tremendously when you start advocating for the poor because the president's policies are adversely affecting the poor. They get angry. Because Republicans should never be advocating for the poor in their mind. Although we're the ones that want to grow the economy so that people can get jobs and have their incomes.
That's right.
They say they want to improve the economy. All they want to do is transfer money from one group of people to another group of people and they control who gets the jobs. That doesn't grow the economy. That doesn't innovate. We don't get better products at a better price. There's no competition. That is pure government control, and that's what the Democrats advocate for. We do something entirely different. So the question is, I think, how do we get back to what you're saying? We need a strong U.S. dollar. We need to quit devaluing the U.S. dollar and artificially keeping interest rates low and prices high. And by the way, it wasn't, maybe a month ago, Ben Bernanke announced that he might one day in the future, he said, once unemployment gets down to 6.5%, by the way, if unemployment gets down to 6.5%, it won't be because there's new jobs. It will be because people have left the job market under this administration. But he said once we get down there, we might slow down the quantitative easing, is what he said. And what happened? The bond market crashed, interest rates spiked, the stock market crashed. And then he had to come back and say, oh, I didn't mean that. And then the stock market came back. And so, look, this is all fabricated. What we're looking at now in the American economy and the stock market, it's not real.
It's unreal.
Yeah. And so, and these are the kind of liberal policies where politicians in D.C. try to control everything outside of the free market. And now everything is unreal. There will come a day.
It will crash.
Yeah, there will come a day when we're going to have to unwind. We have never, in American history, had this big of a quantitative easing ever. I mean, it's not even close. We are in uncharted territory right now.
Absolutely.
And it enables politicians to continue doing what they're doing. So it's got to be unwound. It starts with this. Going back to your question, it starts with this. We in Washington, D.C. have to balance the budget. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And by the way, that extreme right-wing Paul Ryan budget, that extreme right-wing budget, they said Paul Ryan was throwing Granny off the cliff. That budget, back in 2011, it balanced 26 years from now, which shows you just how out of whack we are.
Wow.
Ms. Tasha.
Could you comment on the Fort Hood terrorist attack?
Yeah. Workplace violence.
So she's asking about the Fort Hood terrorist attack. Nadal Hassan, who obviously killed a bunch of patriotic Americans. Here, I think, is what people need to understand. It's one of the things we put in the National Defense Authorization Act for religious liberties. People should be able to speak out unabashedly about faith. They shouldn't be concerned about being called a bigot or something else. Everybody knew that Nadal Hassan was off. People knew it. They emails. He had made PowerPoint presentations that were, extremely troubling. Everybody knew that he was off, but nobody would say anything about it because he was Muslim, and they were afraid that if they say anything, they'll be labeled as bigots or intolerant or whatever. Look, the left in this country has taken the mantle of tolerance and they advocate for intolerance. And that's true when you think about Boy Scouts of America. The left in this country, they don't want to create their own organization with a different set of values. What they want to do is they want to attack an organization that has a set of values and force upon them what their values are. That is not tolerance, that is intolerance. And we see that in Obamacare. They don't care what our values are, they want to force their values upon us.
Right.
And it's this claiming the mantle of tolerance and then forcing intolerance is what we see from the left, and that's unfortunately what happened to those brave men and women down in Fort Hood. But there are things we can do. Do you have, yes?
The Purple Heart issue.
I'm unfamiliar.
They're being denied Purple Hearts because that's considered workplace violence as opposed to
Okay.
what it is a terrorist attack.
Yeah, I will look into that. That is that's improper. If that's
Well, their medical costs being covered
that they
too.
would get as being victims of war rather than workplace violence.
Okay.
And the families are suffering because of that.
We will, Gabe will take a note and we'll look into that. One last thing, Troy, oh, this will be it, Gabe, and then we're out.
The Democrats are building a constituency with all these social programs, and they've doubled. Is it possible to tie those benefits to drug testing?
I think it is. I think, number one, where that starts would be at the state level. I don't want I don't want any more federal agencies involved in drug testing people in Oklahoma, quite frankly. But if we could manage that at the state or local level, I would be fully supportive of it. If we could pass a law that gives the states the authority to do that, I'd be in favor of that. When were you in Iraq?
02 to 07.
Okay, so I was doing Southern Watch in 02.
I saw you up there.
Good. And I was doing Shock and Awe. Were you there during Shock and Awe?
No, we got there right after.
Okay, so we were there for the first 2 weeks of the war, flying overhead on the Abraham Lincoln. So thank you for your service. I know there's a lot of vets in here.
Yeah, how many vets do we have in here? Raise your hand. Wow, thank you guys.
You have a comment, real quick.
Just real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, I keep hearing the Republicans on why they lost the election. You know, they aren't supporting immigration reform and this and that. The one thing that I see, and where I'm coming from, and I'm a constituent that received 30 medals for combat in Vietnam. But the Democrats have principles. I don't know about their moral character, but they have principles. If you look at people, when they want to vote for principles and moral character. The Republicans say they want smaller government and less taxes, and they never follow through. And the people are just tired of them lying to us.
I agree completely.
And what I'd like to see is them to stop aid to the United Nations. Stop funding state governments and schools and just get them out of our lives.
I don't agree with your assessment. I don't disagree with your assessment. There are certain, what I would say regarding foreign aid. When you think about the nation of Israel we need to have between the United States and Israel no daylight. And to the extent
That's fine, but I think you have to do what the Democrats do. You have to ask for more than you want.
Okay. Got it. I hear you. Except in our case, we'd be asking for less than we're willing to accept.
Well, ask for what's in the Constitution.
Got it. Okay. I gotta hit the road, everybody. Thank you,
Thank
Rhonda.
you.
Thank you.